Hello, good morning, and welcome to the 44th running of the annual Memorial Day tradition here in Boulder, Colorado. My name is Alan Culpepper, and I'm joined by Mr. Frank Shorter. Since 1979, this event has really just defined what Memorial Day is, not only in Boulder, Colorado, but with the largest Memorial Day celebration. This is really one of the spectacular events of this wonderful holiday. And I'm joined by Mr. Frank Shorter, who since 1979 has been involved with this race in some varying capacity, along with working with Steve Bosley to help create this amazing event. So I'm excited to be here. We're going to be giving you all the action for this first iteration, which is our wheelchair division and our citizens race. And then later on this morning, here just after 11 a.m., we'll be back to call the International Pro Team Challenge for the men and women. We have an amazing field put together. So let's get into the action here, Frank. The wheelchairs started at 6:45, so they are a couple of minutes into the race. And we're going to pick up the start of the citizens race here just in a couple of minutes as well. But, we got a great field once again.
Oh yeah, and Susanna Scaroni, pardon me, from Champaign, Illinois, and she's there because there is a big crowd of It really is the center of wheelchair racing in the United States, the pro racing, and so it's no surprise that she's out front. And for people who haven't watched these races too much before, it used to be there was a lot of drafting going on, and then they realized no, the best tactic was to get right out in front right from the start. Don't let anyone draft behind you, because in running you actually have a 7% energy saving if you run on someone's shoulder. In the wheelchair racing, it's more like 25%. So again, and to be quite honest, the race really is over in this sense. And as long as she doesn't get a flat tire, she's on. And now she's, I think she's probably going over and heading towards Folsom, and she'll make the left-hand turn and then start the climb up Folsom. And for, again, the wheelchair racers, that's tough, but they make it up on the downhill. They really do.
Yeah.
And these wheelchairs, they actually weigh less than a racing bicycle. So
yeah,
the Tour de France bikes are heavier than the wheelchair.
Yeah, this is a very high-end technical sport. These chairs are specifically designed for the athletes. Yeah, it is not a thrown together kind of thing. These athletes are training. They're very focused on various events, and fortunately the Boulder is one of those that not only supports and brings in these athletes from around the country, but also provides prize money for them.
And the history is in the early is this started in 1970s in Boston, the Boston Marathon. A guy named Bobby Hall. He was the first, and he did it in a standard wheelchair. And so over the last 50 years, really, almost 50 years, it's evolved to this point. And the training is very much the same. They'll do the same long rides, and then the same interval kind of training, go hard, rest that the runners do. Train the same way.
But they like to get excited maybe the first quarter mile and be out front, and then our real contenders usually show themselves quickly thereafter. Sorry, Eric, is my mic working properly?
computers are so sophisticated now. They can tell you what pace, what pace you're running right now.
Okay, got Frank back in the stadium. I am not hearing him in my ear, though. So there we have our unofficial time on the wheelchair side is just about 8 minutes and 30 seconds, and the A wave is 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So they are not quite to the mile mark. You see a big pack of athletes back there behind our leader, who has separated himself just ever so slightly, I would say about 10 meters, Frank, from best I can tell.
And he's running easily. He's not straining. I think we'll get a better look about what his lead is. Again, I always have remembered that turn where you're heading west and then you make a right-hand turn on Folsom and you start climbing. And that first climb is when you kind of get an idea of how people are doing, how relaxed they are. And then when they get to the top of that little hill in Folsom, to see how they can maintain it as they head a little bit further north and then turn west to come back towards the stadium.
So that's Aiden Reed, 26-year-old, training here in Boulder, Colorado. Aiden he looks great to me. You know, fortunately we have a really nice morning for racing. It will be interesting to see how the temperature, climbs as we get through the morning, as we move towards the elite race. But for now, for this time of day, 6:50 a.m. start, you couldn't ask for better conditions. Very, very light wind, crisp morning, but not too cool. So these athletes, there's really no excuse weather-wise, especially for our A wave later in the day. We'll see how that affects it.
And that was about 4:51 for the first mile. I think that was the first mile mark.
So right about just over 30-minute pace, which is very solid. Kind of our standard, what we usually see in this A wave is right around that 30-30 mark is kind of the standard for the A wave. So let's see, as best we can tell, again, we're going off of our live feed here, and it's always a little bit interesting with the sun glare in the morning and with the angles when we're off the press truck of trying to get numbers, especially with our wheelchair athletes, just because their numbers are on the side of the chair. So that's always a bit tricky, but best we know is that's Susanna Scaroni out of Champaign, Illinois, is still our leader. She's coming up on 11 minutes on the course. So, of course, our fastest athletes of the day will be the push rim division, where they'll cover this 10K quite a bit quicker than anybody else.
Now she's on a slight downhill. She's done climbing, and I think she's made a turn towards the west. You can see the turnover and just the rate at which she's turning over. And as I said, just as Champaign, Illinois has become an enclave for the wheelchair pro racers. And so it's no surprise that she, this is not her hometown, she has made the decision to move there to train. And that's one of the elements, whether you're a wheelchair athlete or a runner, at a certain point in your career, you really have to make a decision about where you're going to go so that you can maximize your potential. And now in the United States in running, there are several of these, but in wheelchair racing, I still have to say that Champaign, Illinois is the center of it.
So Susanna just passed that 5K mark, so she's already halfway and making her turn through those neighborhoods of Boulder, where this part becomes a bit more technical just due to the number of turns. But from our vantage point, we don't see anyone in contention even within 100 meters of her at this point. Our defending champion, Kendall Gretsch, is back this year, and not seeing her as a factor at this point. So Susanna, whatever she's doing training-wise, seems to be translating quite well. And Frank, to your point, the fact that these athletes get together and train together is really one of those main advantages that we're seeing, not just in cycling that we've known for years, where they put the teams together, but in the wheelchair athletes, where they want to train together. And we've seen this, in the elite athlete world, which, Frank, you were a big pioneer in that, of getting athletes together to train together, which is why Boulder became one of the primary hubs around the country and around the world. back to our A-Wave Citizens Race. Just as a bit of an overview, the A-Wave, you have to qualify to get into this first wave. So these are athletes that have put forth some sort of a time standard that they submitted, or reach out to the race management to share that, hey, here's some recent races that I've competed in, so that they can have that luxury of being up front with a clear road in front of them and really vying to compete against the top athletes in that A wave. As we move through the field, there's obviously different waves for different categories, and we have walking waves and buff waves and all sorts of waves, which that wave start is such a pioneering. One of the amazing features of this race is just how cutting edge they've always been, and race creator Steve Bosley invented the wave start, which is just such a innovation that now every race uses this, that's of any significance, of any size, including the major marathons. And it just helps bleed out the athletes slowly across the course to not create unnecessary congestion. And with the invention of chip timing, as soon as you start cross that start line, and as soon as you finish across the finish line, you get your official time. So it's not like the clock starts running when the gun goes off. It's when you actually start and finish that race. So it's just one of the other amazing inventions of this race.
And he went through 3 kilometers in 9:02, which, as we said, it's that now he's on pace to run a little bit over 30 minutes. If he maintains that pace to the end, he'll run 36:06 or 30:08, and he looks good. His turnover's good, and I see he turns around just to see, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but your coaches always tell you don't look around that much. But I think he wants to see what his effort is gaining him, literally gaining him, and he's gaining.
Yeah, and he does have has a good
if
lead.
If he gets through halfway and he has this kind of lead, given his rhythm now, the real test on this course is running up that hill about 4 miles at Casey Junior High. That's when you kind of get an idea, and the athletes will tell you this is where you really find out how you're doing, because once you get to that 4 mile point, it really is downhill almost all the way to the finish, and it's harder to catch people downhill than it is uphill.
And speaking of downhill, looks like our wheelchair leader, Susanna Scaroni, is on that downhill. So she's now 16 minutes into the race, and using that downhill, as you said earlier, they have such a distinct advantage on the downhill. So that's where the uphills, where they're really having to work and focus in the downhill. They can recover, and then as soon as she makes that turn into downtown, now looks like she's on to Pearl Street. So that's where she'll really get back on it. You can see there, 7K, 3K to go. For my assessment, Frank, it looks to be about a 4-second lead on the men's side in the Citizens race and that A wave, which there's always that little window of how far is enough to where you feel like you've kind of broken the away to where they don't feel like they can bring you back in. It's still very early. They're only 12 minutes into the race, so there's still plenty of time, but there's still the mental component of this race where you're not just racing the clock and you're not just racing yourself, but you're trying to actually play the chess game of trying to see strategically what you do to just to throw off your competitors and to make sure that the mind game is part of it. And it looks like right now he's definitely created that space, and now it's just a matter of his fitness. Can his fitness maintain it and hold it?
Yeah, he's carrying his arms a little bit higher, and his rhythm is a little bit slower, but it really is a matter of getting past that hill at 4 miles, Casey Junior High, and then how you feel and maintain down as you approach Folsom for that last time and make the right-hand turn to start the hill climb. And that is a critical point I've found. You make that right-hand turn, and then I think you should look back, and you really get a sense of, how far back someone is, because so many times this race, particularly the Citizens race, people gain, and you sense you're gaining on someone with an effort that at that point, about half a mile from the finish, you feel you can maintain. And if you start to feel that person ahead of you is coming back to you, it really is a motivator. and that's where you can run really, really hard.
And it looks that his lead has actually grown to me. And so he's coming up on the 5K mark. And so we'll get a better sense of what pace he's running there. And we'll actually give you some other updates on who's behind there as we sift through our notes. That looks to be Pat Smith to me out of Santa Fe.
Again, another enclave down there, and it's just high enough. The altitude is very similar to here in Boulder. And so again, you train where you feel the best and you're happiest. And so it's no surprise. And in the early years, my family moved to New Mexico in the 60s, and there were great runners there. Rick Rojas, who was from down there, who won the first Boulder, and he came from Los Alamos, and so they migrated up here. But then over the years, they developed their own enclave down there.
And that's our third place athlete, Ryder, and I'm going with Surly. I apologize, Ryder, if that's not correct, but Ryder is out of Lakewood, 28-year-old, so local athlete as well. So he's in third there, so to left of screen is third. And then second was our gentleman out of Santa Fe, Pat Smith. And then our leader, Aiden Reed, is still out in front of those two. But those three have now created, as we shared that gap, that spacing, and then the main pack. And there's your 5K mark. So halfway home, 15:30 range. So right in that 30-minute zone that we've talked about.
$1K to go on the wheelchair.
$1K to go. So she is making her way. So she'll be the fastest and the first to enjoy this wonderful entrance. Unlike really outside of a major championship, there's really nothing like it. Finishing in a stadium like this and being able to showcase their talents as we move later in the day and all the masses come and finish and fill up this amazing stadium. It'll be really amazing to have the pro athletes. They've all shared, anyone who's run this race has shared it's really their greatest exhilaration they've ever felt at a road race. And so we'll hopefully be able to showcase that later today for you all.
And pretty soon, I think she'll cross Boulder Creek and then that climb into the stadium.
And Aiden, looking at our splits from the Citizens race, Aiden Reed he ran a 4:54 for his third mile. So he is extending that lead because Smith behind him and Ryder behind him were running 5:05 pace. So they've separated themselves. It's not insurmountable at 17 minutes into the race. I would definitely say it's not insurmountable, but he at this point has maintained a quicker pace.
And if he gets to mile 5, which is just before you get to Folsom and come back to the stadium, and he has this kind of lead, I think we can bank on his being first.
In our wheelchair division, our leader from the gun, from the start, Susanna Scaroni, is making her way up Stadium Drive, so she will be making that left-hand turn into the stadium here momentarily, and we will welcome her to Folsom Field as the first competitor throughout the day with some 46,000 other individuals to follow.
And I had an update. I had an update from Cliff Bosley about an hour ago, and he said, given they had 47,400 registered as of yesterday, so it could be that there'll be 48,000, which is good news, very good news.
And here we have our leader. Let's welcome her in. Susanna Scaroni out of Champaign, Illinois. Your overall and first female champion for the Wheelchair Pro race. Congratulations, Susanna. We will keep an eye out for the rest of the wheelchair division that'll be making their way into the stadium here shortly, and do our best to call out those athletes, as well as keeping an eye on the men's A-Wave division and then our top female finisher as she comes in a few minutes after the top male.
And I think he's approaching that hill at 4 miles. He'll start to climb, and that's where he can really get a good idea of where he is. And he'll probably look around when he gets to the top to see just what his lead is.
Yep, that looks to be Casey Hill, as it's affectionately known, with Casey Middle School right there on the athlete's left-hand side, just past 4 miles. So as we all know, a 10-kilometer race is 6.2 miles. So the kilometers is actually easier to do the math on if you're actually looking. But he's making his way up to the top of that hill and still maintaining that lead.
And it shows you how long I've been in Boulder. I keep calling it Casey Junior High.
And there's the summit, 53:01. Is that what that says there? 53:91. So that's the highest point on the course, 5,391 feet. And then immediately, as soon as you crest the top, you immediately come right back down. You're making your way towards downtown Boulder. And there's a lot of athletes that will say they'll hold back a little bit on the hill, knowing that they're at elevation and that they know they can just really roll down the downhill. But last year we saw in the pro men's race, and we'll talk about this more later today, that Connor Mance intentionally kind of held back on the uphill, and then those athletes got a decent amount of space on him on the downhill to where he wasn't able to close that until much later in the race. We'll see who takes advantage of the downhill. Some athletes are just better at downhill running.
Absolutely.
The recent innovation with shoes has helped, I think, everyone get a little bit better and trust really letting themselves go on the downhill, because the shoes are just so much more cushioned and responsive. But he has broken away from his competitors. So give you a quick rundown of our top 4. That's Aiden Reed, Pat Smith, Ryder Surley, and Jacob Riley. Jacob's a familiar name. He was an Olympian in our last Olympics in the marathon. So Jake, is great to see him back out there. I'd say he's had his fair share of setbacks and injuries and struggles, and really nice to have him back building and moving back towards that level that he once had here about 4 years ago. And here's our second competitor in the wheelchair division. That is our champion from last year, Kendall Gretsch, back again to showcase her talents, putting forth a really great effort again today. Kendall Gretsch out of Colorado Springs. That was Howie Sanborn, our returning champion from last year on the men's side, that just came across the line. Nice to have Howie back. We don't have any updates on the women's division in the A-Wave as of yet. We did have some prominent names ahead of the race that we were kind of keeping an eye on. Neely Gracie trains here in Boulder. Laura Thweet also trains in Boulder. Both competitors that have taken part in the elite division of this race. on the pro athlete side of things. So both high-level runners. So we'll see how those two fare, but we are really at the mercy of our live feed, which is off of that amazing press truck. But we're trying to get as many updates as we possibly can, along with our next wheelchair competitor coming across the line, making that final turn. That is Emmy Perry, also out of Colorado Springs. Tyler Byers out of Spokane Valley, Washington. And that's Matt Tinley out of Colorado Springs. Okay, Frank, here we go at the 4 mile mark. On the men's side, Aiden Reed was still winning. He used that downhill to his advantage to run a 4:52 mile. Pat Smith, Ryder Surley, Jacob Riley, all of our top 4. Aiden is with Roots Running, so a very organized and high-level group that trains here in Boulder. And he has a 28:27 personal best. He's a 2:20 marathoner, so that translates quite well, I would say, Frank, that 28:30 range. Usually I would say you add about a minute for elevation, but that would be, apples to apples on the track and that type of thing.
And it looks, with that kind of fitness he's showing here, I imagine his next marathon, he will probably go under 2 hours and 20 minutes. Again, still holding on. You can see his turnovers a little bit slower. His arms are a little bit more raised, but he's comfortable. And that 5 mile split is going to be very, very critical to see, and they should be very close to it.
And as far as updates on the women's side, we do have our top 4 now. Molly Grable, who's running just under 5:30 per mile. In second is Laura Thweet, who we mentioned earlier. Third place, Gwen Jorgensen. Gwen was a Olympic champion, gold medalist in the triathlon. So she is high-level athlete who had then made the transition over to high-level competing and specifically focused on running, then went back to triathlon. So Gwen is really a well-rounded, versatile athlete. Nice to see her out there.
And
then Neely Gracie in fourth.
They're all together.
So from the start, from the very get-go, Aiden Reed just said, I'm gonna make this race, see how I feel today, and not really depend on anybody else. Just past the 9K mark, so just over 3 minutes, we will see him enter the stadium as our first in the citizens race. And from best we could tell, he still has about a 10-second lead. He's running about, just over about 4 or 5 seconds per mile quicker each mile. So unless he really fades, Frank, then I would be surprised at this point if anyone's going to catch him.
He's
Mark
relaxed.
that 30-second lead, rather.
And he's not fading. He's 30 seconds ahead.
And you can tell by his cadence here that he recognizes where he is, and you can tell by the arm carry and just the general effort.
They're going a little harder.
He's working harder, but he's also accelerating to me. He looks to be accelerating.
Yes. Run as hard as you can to that right-hand turn up the hill to the stadium, and then hold on.
I like that perspective. We get a sense of how fast they're actually going, 12 miles per hour when you're thinking to do that for 30 minutes straight. That is Sherry Madsen out of Union, Nebraska. coming across the line. And Mason Brandstrider out of Duluth, Minnesota. Okay, back to our women's race. As a quick update, sorry we don't have good visuals on that, but we're giving the best we can in terms of updates. Still Molly Grable in the lead. She ran a 5:13 mile for that 5th mile, so really, again, use that downhill to her advantage. Laura Thweet was at 5:24. So she has now put herself in over 10-second lead over Laura. And Gwen Jorgensen is another 8 seconds back. And then Neely Gracie, another 12 seconds back. So the women have separated themselves, and it looks to be Molly's race at this point at 5 miles. And here we have our overall Citizens Race men's champion, Aiden Reed. Training and living here in Boulder, Colorado. Going to be very close to that 30-minute mark. Right at 30 minutes. Congratulations, Aiden. Great run. Led start to finish. Aside from a few glances of just checking where he was, looking back, there was no hesitation that he was here to win this race, and that's a great effort up here.
And it seems he ran the second half of the race a couple seconds faster than the first half. So he ran what was the best race for him. He couldn't have run any better. He got everything he could out of himself.
And here we have our second and third place finishers. That's Ryder Surley and Pat Smith coming across the line. Also fantastic runs. 30-45, really high level running. We have our first costume competitor, which is really impressive to run that fast in a banana suit. That looked to be Stephen Goldie in the banana outfit. It's impressive, Stephen. And now the rest of the field will just continue to stream in. It will become more and more dense as we go, but really these athletes really had a great morning and showcased all that hard work they've been putting in. A lot of these, this is a big focus for their spring is, all right, we're gonna train all spring and use Boulder to launch their racing season for the summer. We will keep an eye out for our top female finishers and try and get a visual and make sure we give them their due support.
Should be pretty soon.
Sure, yes, exactly. Any minute we will definitely, they're at 32:45. So we will have our top female athletes coming down that ramp momentarily. Last we heard was Molly Grable, who was leading and had broken away from Laura Thweet and had
she's climbing the hill. She's at 6 miles right at this point. So it's another 15 seconds maybe. She'll make the turn.
There's Molly. We see her now in the pink top. She is making that right-hand turn. So congratulations to Molly. 33:20 on the clock now. Congratulations to our top female finisher on the women's side, Molly Grable.
All right. 33:40.
And there's Laura Thweet making that right-hand turn now. Great effort by Laura. She'll be our second place female finisher. And I think we have Gwen Jorgensen now making the right-hand turn. Yes, that is Gwen. Congratulations to Gwen. Top 3 here in the Boulder. Olympic champion in the triathlon, so well-rounded athlete.
I would hate to be a woman turning around and one of her triathlons and seeing her there in the middle of the run, because that's about as fast of a woman triathlete, female triathlete, as you're ever going to see.
All right, well, thanks for joining us this morning for the Citizens Race in the wheelchair division. It was great to have our first athletes really get out there and pave the way for the other 46-some thousand that are going to be finishing today. And Frank, I mean, that was right off the bat. I think it showcased that we have a great day in store. Great athletes to come later in the day for our Pro Elite International Team Challenge.
Oh, it's going to be great. And the wave is trickling offshore now, and it's starting to build, and pretty soon it's just going to cascade in here. It's going to be great. And with, again, did I mention no wind? That's what the athletes love. They really do, because then you don't have to worry about going into it, trying to vary your effort. So perfect day, and it also